Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. I'm Michael Marchuk.
And I'm Brad Hairston.
And this is our weekly roundup, our pulse check of the latest AI and automation news. And Brad, today we've got 4 articles to go off of. 3 of them are relatively lengthy, and then we got one fun one at the end for us. So let's start off here with the MIT Technology Review. The name of this article is China Built Hundreds of AI Data Centers to Catch the AI Boom. Now, many stand unused, which is kind of hard for me to believe given the fact that the US is building data centers at a breakneck speed and doesn't have enough, evidently. So one of the things they mention here is how DeepSeek may have changed the game in the whole country of China. So tell us what you thought of this article.
You know, at first glance, this reminded me of the 2010s when China was building all these, what were called ghost cities. Do you remember that?
I do.
All over China, these cities were like popping up and they were empty. And, you know, it's easy to do when you're a state-controlled authoritarian government. Here's a city, boom, there it is. So at first it sounded like that, but this is actually talking about private companies in China that once the AI boom happened, they started building data
Jumping
centers
on the bandwagon, right?
left and right. Yeah, and the government actually it cites as one of the investors in a lot of these. But what's interesting is 2 Chinese sources say that up to 80% of these data centers remain unused, and that the GPU rental price is at an all-time low. Now they do, as you mentioned, they do cite DeepSeek as maybe one of the reasons. You know, along comes DeepSeek. It has innovated the way it's built its model. It does it in a lot more efficient, a cheaper way than OpenAI and others, you know, did. And so maybe that decreased the need for a lot of the data center capacity. They also mention that a lot of these data centers were kind of strung together, maybe not using the right talent. And so you have some that are not as stable as, you know, companies like DeepSeek would want. So that may be playing a role. Regardless of the reason, I think they feel like they just got ahead of the curve and that a lot of this capacity will be used at some point as the demand, you know, kind of catches up with it. But again, we've seen this before in China, whether it's the government or private industry, they try to go at something and they don't care if they overbuild and the supply exceeds the demand. They're willing to take that chance. And we'll see if this pays off. The AI race is pretty heated between China and the US. I guess it depends on whether DeepSeek and the companies like DeepSeek are going to take advantage of all of these private companies, or they're going to decide, like OpenAI did, to build their own and to invest in their own infrastructure.
I thought that was interesting too, in terms of, you talked about how the private companies were building. The article cites this, and the potential is that they were gaming the system, where as we know here in the United States, companies are building or looking at nuclear power plants as a conjunction with the data center because of the amount of power requirements for the data center to operate. And as part of this, there were incentives in China to create green energy to run these data centers. And well, if the data center is not using any power because no one's there using it, these operators have found a way then to get subsidies for the green energy to sell back that energy to the grid at a profit. So there's potentially a data center that was just there as a decoy as they built the power, which is really the primary goal for the project anyway. So it's interesting to see how this is, and we've seen this everywhere we go, right? If there's an incentive to do one thing that allows folks to make money, they will figure out the loopholes to make that happen, won't they?
They will. And you know, Michael, it was in late 22, that's when China basically laid down the gauntlet and said, we need as much AI infrastructure as we can get. And the article says 150 data centers were finished within the next 2 years. So it's not a surprise that they have far exceeded the demand, and they overbuilt, if you will. Maybe all these data centers will be used for Bitcoin mining, because you remember in the US, it was the other way around. All the Bitcoin
Right.
mining
Exactly.
facilities got converted to AI hosting centers. But
I think it's gonna be something else. What they're gonna do is they're gonna take all these data centers, make them into giant warehouses that can power up all of their humanoid robots that they're producing. And so it'll be like a giant garage where they go
it's
into at
possible.
night and plug in.
You're just not a Bitcoin believer or a crypto believer. If you were, you would see my point, but that's okay.
I would see your point, but you're right. At this point in time, I'm thinking there's other uses. So
Yeah.
let's move on to our second article here. This is actually an article that was a post on LinkedIn that had gotten a lot of traction. The post is the algorithm of sacrifice: how Microsoft's 6,000 layoffs reveal big tech's endgame. So this is an ominous opinion piece, in my opinion,
Yes.
on the layoffs that Microsoft produced last week or so, and the fact that the organizational updates are sending workers out on the streets. So tell us what your thoughts were about this opinion article.
The article could have been titled "Big Tech is Evil. It's taking over the world and trying to eliminate all human jobs." It's a very long post or article. I guess LinkedIn would probably call it an article. And it's definitely, voices very strong opinion. It's basically talking about the fact that Microsoft recently laid off 6,000 people amid record profits. So their releases, their earnings release was very close to this layoff. And they talked about having 125 billion in cash reserves and quarterly profits of 25.8 billion. And then they lay off 6,000 people. So this article is written by someone who's basically highly critical of the fact that Microsoft is sensitive to these people when their profits are so great. They're needlessly laying off 6,000 people. And she points to the fact that most of them, although I'm not sure this is 100% accurate, but she says a lot of them were on teams that were building AI capabilities and AI products. They basically worked themselves out of a job. And so she uses that as yet another criticism of Microsoft, that these people did what you asked them to do, and now you're going to eliminate their jobs with AI, with automation. So it's a very highly critical piece, directed at Microsoft, but she's clearly talking about big tech in general and trying to make the point that this is a pattern. This is not a one-off thing. This is a pattern. These companies are eliminating middle management. Then they force the managers to take on more subordinates. That becomes unsustainable. They have to use AI to augment what they can do. That then takes over their jobs. So she sees this downward spiral where basically all jobs are being removed and eliminated because of AI and automation. Very doom and gloom kind of perspective. I want to say it's incumbent upon everyone, no matter what company you're in, no matter what job you're in, to stay up with innovation, to reskill, to upskill, and to basically expect that your job is going to change as a result of all this stuff that's happening. No one is going to be unaffected by AI, but it doesn't mean our jobs completely go away, but we have to be ready. We have to adapt. And, for many of us, it means we'll be moving into new jobs or different roles, or we'll be putting aside some of the things that we do today that we think are really, really important for us to do. But if AI can do it better, then let's focus our time and attention elsewhere. I think we all have to realize that the price of progress is our jobs will change, our responsibilities will change. And I think for the most part, that is a very positive thing if we think of it the right way.
Right. No, I agree. So I got two points to make. Part of this is her last sentence in this article was the algorithm of sacrifice demands efficiency above all else. And in the church of shareholder value, human capital has become the preferred offering. So in a very, very much flowery language, demonizing capitalism. The reality is, let's look at the numbers. 6,000. Oh my gosh, 6,000 people were let go. Do you know how many they had? Over 200,000 workers. So that's a 3% reduction. Guess how many people leave on a percentage basis in any one year from most companies, right? 15, maybe more.
Yeah.
Okay, being conservative, 15% natural attrition turnover.
Right.
And this is talking about a 3% layoff globally. Where it's nobody wants to be let go from a job. It's a bad thing. However, in terms of the gross number of these things, you have to look in context too. If this was a 7,000 person company, that would be news. Oh my gosh, they're basically shutting down. But this is a 3% adjustment in their business practices.
Right.
And I bet of those 6,000 that were let go, how many new jobs are being created within Microsoft to be able to support their ongoing operations? It's probably likely the same or more.
Right.
So it's difficult to look at this and say, because I don't know about you, I've been in IT for a really long time and I've been laid off 3 times.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way life works in this cyclical industry that we're in. But to your point, if you're not always reinventing yourself with a new technology, there will come a time where you will find yourself on that short end. Hey, listen, we've moved a different direction and your skill set is not necessarily what we need anymore. And because you haven't kept up to date, or because this whole division has gone away, and it's never always the person's problem. If we go to a point where they said, listen, we're shutting down Skype. Okay. How many people were working on Skype? It's a product they just discontinued. And it's not because it was a bad product. It's because the market had evolved from the 15, 20 years ago when Skype started. So going into that, you have to realize there were people that are affected by that business decision, not because Microsoft's evil, just because the product's being discontinued, and all those people, however many there were, either had to get relocated somewhere else in the company or let go. All right. Let's get off of our soapboxes now. And while we're ranting about all of the horridness coming from the capitalistic society that we live in, let's get into our next article from the Wall Street Journal. Everybody's replaceable. The new ways bosses talk about workers. So let's get back on our soapbox, this time with a bigger drum. This one's talking about the fact that work-life balance, which we all talk about as a positive thing, is not necessarily looked on as a positive thing in some companies because of this, the articles, what it's talking about. So can you lead us through how horrible we are at this point?
Yeah, this article could have been written by the previous author. It's very much in the same tone. It's talking about the fact that the days of employers coddling their employees, telling them that they are the most prized asset in the company, those days are gone. They're long gone. Now, what you hear CEOs saying, and it's happening almost every day, our employees need to work harder. They need to complain less. They need to be glad that they still have jobs. You know, a lot of jobs are being automated and replaced with AI. So there is a definite shift in tone. And I think for some, it's hard to hear that. They just feel like CEOs need to be more politically correct in the way they communicate to their people and just the tone that they use. The article makes the point that there's a huge disconnect between employees and employers that has been demonstrated just in the last few years since the pandemic ended. And now all these employers are starting to make people go back to work, go back to the office. And so many employees felt like that was a permanent change. They were going to be at home forever. And boy, did that change. And there's a lot of people not happy about that. To make it even worse, there's some CEOs, and the article mentions one CEO who recently told employees that his company won't make any hires unless the managers who want to hire can prove that AI is not capable of doing that job. So they're going to have to demonstrate that clearly AI cannot do this before they can go and hire another human worker. Now, I'm sure that went over really well within the employee base. So yeah, we're in a different era. I think it's more competitive. You know, companies are changing or being forced to change at such a faster pace. I'm sure these CEOs are stressed out, and I'm sure they're tired of a lot of the complaining and bad attitudes among, people, especially these companies with, significant number of employees. If they're asking them to come back to work and they're getting a lot of pushback and what have you, I think they're kind of past their point of being diplomatic and careful in what they say. And so you're seeing a new attitude that is coming across as a little bit harsh and a little bit uncaring.
You're putting it nicely if you read this article.
Yeah,
the quotes in here are harsh.
Yeah, they are harsh, but there's at least some people at those companies, I guarantee, that would say, you know what, our CEO cares about profits, cares about being successful so that we can get bonuses, so that our company can continue to grow.
It gets to the point of where the company culture starts being affected by the tone. And it's always, you just go back to you get more results with honey than vinegar. You catch more flies with more honey than vinegar. So the idea behind all this is what kind of culture do you want to be known for in your organization? And that gets set at the very top. So if you have CEOs who are pounding their fist and demanding things, people may look at that as that's positive. They want things to go forward with. They also may look at it another way, which is, I don't want to be a slave to my job.
Right.
And that is something that people have mentioned, is that this becomes when you have too much of an imbalance where the work-life balance becomes imbalanced. So I think it could also be a generational thing, because our generation and the boomer generation, because we're Xers, we've gone through the cycles, and we know that, we got to work pretty hard for stuff. If you are a Gen Zer or perhaps a young millennial going through COVID, where you were able to basically name your price in all of your things you wanted in 2021, when the supply demand kind of curve was the opposite direction, they forgot that this is a cycle, and this will go back and forth, and soon they will be back in the driver's seat again, where companies will need experienced people. But with all the swings with the normal economic cycles, we're going to see this. It's going to swing both ways. And right now it's swinging to the point where the economic pressures are so tough that organizations are really having to make tough decisions. And you need people who can make tough decisions. And unfortunately, sometimes those people who are making those tough decisions don't necessarily say them in the most caring way. And that's just reality.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, everybody is replaceable, but you can make yourself less replaceable if you are educating yourself on all the newest technologies and staying up to date with where things are going.
Be part of the change. Don't be affected by the change. That's the way I
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And our last article, speaking of things where things are going, let's take this to the nth degree, as some professors did at Carnegie Mellon. This is from futurism.com. The article says, professors staffed a fake company entirely with AI agents, and you'll never guess what happened. So Carnegie Mellon University created a fake software company and staffed it entirely with AI agents with specific goals and whatnot. What happened? Tell us what happened.
Carnegie Mellon, birthplace of the self-driving car technology. I mean, they're the perfect place to run an experiment like this. And I love this article. I mean, it had me smiling the whole time. It reminded me of the story we did many months ago, that the company that had all these industrial robots, and they left them alone. And one of them convinced all the other robots to leave. Remember that? And they left the building. I mean, it's just really interesting when you take this highly sophisticated technology and you let it try to work together with other AI driven agents, and you see what happens. So in this experiment, they used artificial workers from Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Meta. And each of them trained with a specific role, like a financial analyst or a software engineer, project manager. And they gave them an objective, and each of them had a set of tasks that they were supposed to accomplish during the day. And the results were absolutely dismal. So the best performing AI worker in the mix was Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And Michael, it was only able to finish 24% of the task assigned to it. And it was very expensive in doing so. It averaged 30 steps, and each of those steps cost approximately $6 per task. So that's not great payback on only getting 24% of the work done. Google Gemini 2.0 Flash was the second best performing, and it accomplished 11.4% of the work assigned to it, and that required 40 steps per task. So that doesn't sound great either. But in the end, the researchers that watched this experiment concluded that the agents were very capable in and of themselves, but working together, they were plagued by three things: a lack of common sense, weak social skills, and a poor understanding of how to navigate the internet. Now, that last one is really interesting because I would think it could navigate the internet extremely well, but they found that that was not something it could do. Common sense and social skills, I totally get. Those are more human capabilities than they are machine capabilities. But I think the net of all this, these AI agents are amazing, and they are, they are the hot topic. They're not ready to work together and replace all humans and take over an office and all the various functions that were included in this experiment. They're a long way from that. So I think it was a fun experiment that we can draw a lot of insights from. To me, it just says there's hope for the human race. We're not going away anytime soon.
Right.
And this experiment confirmed it.
Exactly. Well, to end our episode here today, obviously we've covered a lot of things. All links to the articles will be in our show notes, so please go ahead and read these, and maybe you'll form some other opinions that maybe we didn't uncover for you. And every week we have a great guest on, so be sure to stay tuned to our normal programming. And next week we'll bring you another set of new articles on our weekly AI Pulse Check. So see you then.